Section 12 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Wenrou Yi, Singapore. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 2, by Xueqin. Translated by Henry Bancroft Jolly. Chapter 30, Part 2. It happened to be the season of the greatest heat. Breakfast time, too, was already past, and masters as well as servants were, for the most part, under the influence of the lassitude on lengthy days. As Baoyu therefore strolled from place to place, his hand behind his back, he heard not so much as the call of a crow, issuing out of his grandmother's compound on the near side. He wended his steps westwards, and crossed the passage on which Lady Feng's quarters gave. As soon as he reached the entrance of her court, he perceived the door ajar. But aware of Lady Feng's habit of taking, during the hot weather, a couple of hours' siesta at noon, he did not feel it a convenient moment to intrude. Walking accordingly through the corner door, he stepped into Madame Wang's apartment. Here he discovered several waiting maids, dozing with their needlework clasped in their hands. Madame Wang was asleep on the cool couch in the inner rooms. Jing Chuan'er was sitting next to her, massaging her legs, but she too was quite drowsy, and her eyes were all awry. Baoyu drew up to her with gentle tread. The moment, however, was he unfastened the pendants from the earrings she wore. Jing Chuan'er opened her eyes, and realized that it was no one than Baoyu. "Are you feeling so worn out?" he smartly remarked in a low tone of voice. Jing Chuan'er pursed up her lips and gave him a smile, then waving her hands so as to bid him quit the room, she again closed her eyes. Baoyu, at the sight of her, felt considerable affection for her, and unable to tear himself away, so quietly stretching his head forward, and noticing that Madame Wang's eyes were shut, he extracted from a purse suspended about his person one of the scented snow for moistening mouth pills, with which it was full, and placed it on Jing Chuan'er's lips. Jing Chuan'er, however, did not open her eyes, but simply held the pill in her mouth. Baoyu then approached her and took her hand in his. "I ask you of your mistress," he gently observed, smiling, "and you and I will live forever." To this, Jing Chuan'er said not a word. "If that won't do," Baoyu continued, "I'll wait for your mistress to wake and appeal to her at once." Jing Chuan'er distended her eyes wide and pushed Baoyu off. "What's the hurry?" she laughed. "A gold hairpin may fall into the well, but if it's yours, it'll remain yours only. Is it possible that you don't even see the spirit of this proverb? But I'll tell you a smart thing. Just you go into the small court on the east side, and you'll find for yourself what Mr. Jia Huan and Cai Yu are up to." "Let them be up to whatever they like," smiled Baoyu. "I shall simply stick to your side." But he then saw Madame Wang twist herself around, get up, and give a slap to Jing Chuan'er on her mouth. "You mean wench!" she exclaimed, abusing her, while she pointed her finger at her. "It's you, and the like of you, who corrupt these fine young fellows with all the nice things you teach them." The moment Baoyu perceived Madame Wang rise, he bolted like a streak of smoke. Jing Chuan'er, meanwhile, felt half of her face as hot as fire, yet she did not dare utter one word of complaint. The various waiting maids soon came to hear that Madame Wang had awoke, and they rushed in a body. "Go and tell your mother," Madame Wang thereupon said to Yu Chuan'er, "To fetch your elder sister away." Jing Chuan'er at these words speedily fell on her knees, with tears in her eyes. "I won't venture to do it again," she pleaded. "If you, madam, wish to flog me or to scold me, do so at once, and as much as you like, but don't send me away. You will thus accomplish an act of heavenly grace. I've been in attendance on your ladyship for about 10 years, and if you now drive me away, will I be able to look at anyone in the face?" Though Madame Wang was a generous, tender-hearted person, and had at no time raised her hand to give a single blow to any servant girl, she, however, when she accidentally discovered Jing Chuan'er behave on this occasion in this barefaced manner, a manner which had all her lifetime been most reprehensible to her, was so overcome by passion that she gave Jing Chuan'er just one slap and spoke to her a few sharp words. And albeit Jing Chuan'er indulged in solicitous entreaties, she would not on any account keep her in her service. At length, Jing Chuan'er's mother, Dame Bai, was sent for to take her away. Jing Chuan'er therefore had to conceal her disgrace, suppress her resentment, and quit the mansion. But without any further reference to her, we will now take up our story with Baoyu. As soon as he saw Madame Wang awake, his spirits were crushed. All alone, he hastily made his way into the Daguan garden. Here, his attention was attracted by the ruddy sun, shining in the zenith, the shade of the trees extending far and wide, the song of the cicadas filling the air, and by a perfect stillness, not even broken by the echo of a human voice. But the instant he got near the trellis with the cinnamon roses, the sound of sobs fell on his ear. Doubts and surmises crept into Baoyu's mind. So halting at once, he listened with intentness. Then actually he discerned someone on the outside of the trellis. This was the fifth moon, the season when the flowers and the foliage of the cinnamon roses were in full bloom. Furtively peeping through an aperture in the fence, Baoyu saw a young girl squatting under the flowers and digging the ground with a hairpin she held in her hand. As she dug, she silently gave way to tears. "Can it be possible," mused Baoyu, "that this girl too is stupid? Can she also be following Ping Er's example and come to eat flowers? What if she's likewise really borrowing flowers?" He afterwards went on to smilingly reflect. This can aptly be termed Dongshi tries to imitate a frown. But not only is what she does not original, but it is despicable to boot. You needn't. He meant to shout out to the girl, at the conclusion of this train of thought, "Try and copy Miss Lin's example." But before the words had issued from his mouth, he luckily scrutinized her a second time, and found that the girl's features were quite unfamiliar to him, that she was no menial, and that she looked like one of the 12 singing maids who were getting up the days. He could not, however, make out what roles she filled: scholars, girls, old men, women, or buffoons. Baoyu quickly put out his tongue and stopped his mouth with his hand. "How fortunate," he inwardly soliloquized, "that I did not make any reckless remark. It was all because of my inconsiderate talk on the last 2 occasions that Ping Er got angry with me, and that Baochai felt hurt. And had I now given them offence also, I would have been in a still more awkward fix." While wrapped in these thoughts, he felt much annoyance at not being able to recognize who she was. But on further minute inspection, he noticed that this maiden, with contracted eyebrows, as beautiful as the hills in spring, frowning eyes as clear as the streams in autumn, a face with transparent skin, and a slim waist was elegant and beautiful and almost the very image of Lin Daiyu. Pao Yu could not, from the very first, make up his mind to wrench himself away. But as he stood gazing at her in a doltish mood, he realized that, although she was tracing on the ground with the goat hair pin, she was not digging a hole to bury flowers in, but was merely delineating characters on the surface of the soil. Pao Yu's eyes followed the hairpin from first to last, as it went up and as it came down. He watched each dash, each dot, and each hoop. He counted the strokes. They numbered 18. He himself then set to work and sketched with his finger on the palm of his hand the lines in their various directions and in the order they had been traced a few minutes back, so as to endeavor to guess what the character was. On completing the sketch, he discovered, the moment he came to reflect, that it was the character Qiang in the combination Qiang Wei, representing cinnamon roses. She too, pondered Pao Yu, must have been bent upon writing verses, or supplying some line or other, and at the sight now of the flowers, the idea must have suggested itself to her mind, or it may very likely be that having spontaneously devised a couplet, she got suddenly elated and began, for fear it should slip from her memory, to trace it on the ground so as to turn the rhythm. Yet there's no thing. Let me see, however, what she's going to write next. While cogitating, he looked once more. Lo, the girl was still tracing. But tracing up or tracing down, it was ever the character Qiang. When he gazed again, it was still the self-same Qiang. The one inside the fence fell, in fact, from an early stage into a foolish mood. And no sooner was one Qiang finished than she started with another, so that she had already written several tens of them. The one outside gazed and gazed, until he unwittingly also got into the same foolish mood. Intent with his eyes upon following the movements of the pin, in his mind he commused thus with his own thoughts. This girl must, for a certainty, have something to say or some unspeakable momentous secret, that she goes on like this. But if outwardly she behaves in this wise, who knows what anguish she mayn't suffer at heart? And yet, with a frame to all appearances so very delicate, how could she ever resist much inward anxiety? Woe is me that I'm unable to transfer some part of her burden onto my own shoulders. In midsummer, cloudy and bright weather are uncertain. A few specks of clouds surface to bring about rain. Of a sudden, a cold blast swept by, and tossed about by the wind fell a shower of rain. Pao Yu perceived that the water trickling down the girl's head saturated her gauze attire in no time. It's pouring, Pao Yu debated within himself. And how can a frame like hers resist the burnt of such a squall? Unable therefore to restrain himself, he vehemently shouted, "Leave off writing! See, it's pouring! You're wet through!" The girl caught his words, and was frightened out of her wits. Raising her head, she at once descried something, one or other, standing beyond the flowers and calling out to her, "Leave off writing! It's pouring!" But as Pao Yu was, firstly, of handsome appearance, and as secondly, the luxuriant abundance of flowers and foliage screamed with their pods, thick laden with leaves, the upper and lower part of his person, just leaving half of his countenance exposed to view, the maiden simply jumped at the conclusion that he must be a servant girl, and never for a moment dreamed that it might be Baoyu. "Many thanks, sister, for recalling me to my senses," she consequently smiled. "Yet, is there forsooth anything outside there to protect you from the rain?" This single remark proved sufficient to recall Baoyu to himself. With an exclamation of "Aiya!" he at length became conscious that his whole body was cold as ice. Then, dropping his head, he realized that his own person too was drenched. "This will never do," he cried, and with one breath he had to run back into the Yihong court. His mind, however, continued much exercised about the girl, as she had nothing to shelter her from the rain. As the next day was the Dragon Boat festival, Wen Guan and the other singing girls, 12 in all, were given a holiday, so they came into the garden and amused themselves by roaming everywhere and anywhere. As luck would have it, the two girls, Bao Guan, who filled the role of young man, and Yu Guan, who represented young women, were in the Yihong court, enjoying themselves with Xi Ren, when rain set in and they were prevented from going back. So in a body they stopped up the rain to allow the water to accumulate in the yard. Then catching those that could be caught, and driving those that had to be driven, they laid hold of a few of the green-headed ducks, variegated marsh birds, and coloured mandarin ducks, and tying their wings, they let them loose in the court to disport themselves. Closing the court, Xi Ren and her playmates stood together under the veranda and enjoyed the fun. Baoyu therefore found the entrance shut. He gave a rap at the door, but as everyone inside was bent upon laughing, they naturally did not catch the sound, and it was only after he had called and made a noise by thumping at the door that they at last heard. Imagining, however, that Baoyu could not be coming back at that hour, Xi Ren shouted, laughing, "Who's it now knocking at the door? There's no one to go and open." "It's I," rejoined Baoyu. "It's Miss Baochai's tone of voice," added Xue. "Nonsense!" cried Qing Wen. "What would Miss Baochai come over to do at such an hour?" "Let me go," chimed in Xi Ren, "and see through the fissure in the door, and if we can open, we'll open, for we mustn't let her go back wet through." With these words, she came along the passage to the doorway. On looking out, she espied Baoyu dripping like a chicken drenched with rain. Seeing him in this plight, Xi Ren felt solicitous as well as amused. With alacrity, she flung the door wide open, laughing so heartily that she was doubled in two. "How could I ever have known," she said, clapping her hands, "that you had returned, sir? Yet how is that you've run back in this heavy rain?" Baoyu had, however, been feeling in no happy frame of mind. He had fully resolved within himself to administer a few kicks to the person who came to open the door, so as soon as it was unbarred, he did not try to make sure who it was, but under the presumption that it was one of the servant girls, he raised his leg and gave her a kick on the side. "Aiya!" ejaculated Xi Ren. Baoyu nevertheless went on to abuse. "You mean things," he shouted. "It's because I've always treated you so considerately that you don't respect me in the least, and you now go to the length of making a laughing stock of me." As he spoke, he lowered his head, then catching sight of Xi Ren, in tears, he realized that he had kicked the wrong person. "Hello," he said, promptly smiling. "Is it you who've come? Where did I kick you?" Xi Ren had never, previous to this, received even a harsh word from him. When therefore she on this occasion unexpectedly saw Baoyu gave her a kick in a fit of anger, and, what made it worse, in the presence of so many people, shame, resentment, and bodily pain overpowered her, and she did not, in fact, for a time know where to go and hide herself. She was then about to give rein to her displeasure, but the reflection that Baoyu could not have kicked her intentionally obliged her to suppress her indignation. "Instead of kicking," she remarked, "don't you yet go and change your clothes?" Baoyu walked into the room. As he did so, he smiled. "Up to the age I've reached," he observed, "this is the first instance on which I've ever so thoroughly lost control over my temper as to strike anyone. And, contrary to all my thoughts, it's you that happened to come in my way." Xi Ren, while patiently enduring the pain, effected the necessary change in his attire. "I've been here from the very first," she simultaneously added, smilingly. "So, in all things, whether large or small, good or bad, it has naturally fallen to my share to bear the brunt. But not to say another word about your assault on me, why, tomorrow you'll indulge your hand and start beating others." "I did not strike you intentionally just now," retorted Baoyu. "Whoever said," rejoined Xi Ren, "that you did it intentionally? It has ever been the duty of that tribe of servant girls to open and shut the doors, yet they've got into the way of being obstinate, and have long ago become such an abomination that people's teeth itch to revenge themselves on them. They don't know, besides, what fear means. So had you first assured yourself that it was they and given them a kick, a little intimidating would have done them good, but I'm at the bottom of the mischief that happened just now, for not calling those upon whom it devolves to come and open for you." During the course of their conversation, the rain ceased, and Bao Guan and Yu Guan had been able to take their leave. Xi Ren, however, experienced such intense pain in her side, and felt such inward vexation, that at supper she could not put a morsel of anything in her mouth. When in the evening, as the time came for her to have her bath, she discovered, on divesting herself of her clothes, a bluish bruise on her side of the size of a saucer, and she was very much frightened. But as she could not very well say anything about it to anyone, she presently retired to rest, but twitches of pain made her involuntarily moan in her dreams and groan in her sleep. Pao Yu did, it is true, not hurt her with any malice, but when he saw Xi Ren so listless and restless, and suddenly heard her groan in the course of the night, he realized how severely he must have kicked her. So getting out of bed, he gently seized the lantern and came over to look at her. But as soon as he reached the side of her bed, he perceived Xi Ren expectorate, with a rage, a whole mouthful of phlegm. "Oh, me!" she gasped, as she opened her eyes. The presence of Pao Yu startled her out of her wits. "What are you up to?" she asked. "You groaned in your dreams," answered Pao Yu, "so I must have kicked you hard. Do let me see." "My hand feels giddy," said Xi Ren. "My throat foul and sweet. Throw the light on the floor." At these words, Pao Yu actually raised the lantern. The moment he cast the light below, he discerned a quantity of fresh blood on the floor. Pao Yu was seized with consternation. "Dreadful," was all he could say. At the sight of the blood, Xi Ren's heart too partly waxed cold. But, reader, the next chapter will reveal in sequel, if you really have any wish to know more about them. End of section 12. Recording by 温柔以 Singapore.